Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. And today, I am really excited about this conversation you guys are about to hear because, well, frankly, I'm going to get put on the hot seat a little bit. But I'm also really getting into this idea of rewiring your thinking, transforming your life, these major themes that my guest today has literally written the book about. He's a speaker, author, and leadership coach on a mission to unearth and unleash the personal mastery of entrepreneurs and senior executives. He's funny, he's direct, he has this great way of drawing people out that I'm sure you're going to hear in this episode. He is the author of Mindset Mondays with DTK, 52 Ways to Rewire Your Thinking and Transform Your Life. Without further ado, let's get right into it with David Taylor-Klaus. It is an honor to have you here on the Dan Nessel Show. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm actually excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to this one.
It's interesting that the way we prepared for this was by me not preparing at all and you sending me a whole ream of amazing materials. And I have to say that as I was saying just before I got on, I've never been more impressed with the pre-work a guest has done for my show and less impressed with the amount of research that I've done for a show. So we're in for this really great kind of almost on the fly discussion here.
Listen, Larry King spent 25 years doing it exactly like that. Absolutely awesome. No preparation whatsoever. And he seemed to have done fairly well.
Yeah, I think I seem to recall seeing him around.
He might have had an impact for a while.
May his memory be as a blessing.
Yes.
But it is great to be here, and I hope I can do Larry King some service. But I definitely want to do you some service here, David. David is obviously his website is DTK Coaching. So David is a coach. He's been a coach of executives and leaders for the past dozen or so years. Brings on a little over 3 decades of experience to bear with that as a serial entrepreneur and even some tech work, all kinds of great stuff that David has done. We'll get into that probably during the course of the conversation. But his work has brought him to this amazing, I think, approach to coaching. And I love the way that, and I speak to quite a number of coaches here on my program because it's an area of interest of mine, and I am an aspiring coach as well, as you know, David, from the last time we spoke. But David brings coactive coaching to bear. I want to talk about that a little bit and see how you got to where you are, what your story is, what's your unique approach to working with executives and leaders. Why don't you give us a little bit about it?
That was a lot of questions all at once.
I know. I'm sorry.
So no, it's okay.
That's the way I laid out.
That gives me free rein to play.
Yep.
Well, I think my favorite part of the story of how I got here, people have asked me, so how did I end up doing what I'm doing? And I think my greatest qualification is I screwed it up for a really long time and did it really wrong. So not only did I learn from other people's mistakes by repeating them myself, I learned from the mistakes that I made that were new. And we can play with that. But my favorite part of this story is that, fast forward to becoming a coach, my wife, after ages working in issues-based politics at a national level and pausing that to have kids and begin to raise our family, she was ready to use her brain again in a very different way and didn't want to go back into that us versus them world. And bearing in mind, that was 14 years ago. So it wasn't nearly what it's been for the last 4. So she was clearly prescient. So she did a bunch of research and ended up being exposed to coaching and did a ton of research around the training institutions and the types of coaching. And she selected CTI, then called Coaches Training Institute, now Coactive Training Institute. And I got to witness who she was becoming and what was happening for her and in her as she was growing through her coaching journey. And one of the sayings is that we share a lot. The best kept secret to personal development is coach training. I mean, we do this work on ourselves so we can do this work in the world. At least the really good coaches do. And so I realized 2 things. I have a very well-developed FOMO gene, fear of missing out. So part of me was, oh my God, I want some of that. Like I love who she's becoming and what's coming up for her. And then I also realized, holy crap, she was going to outgrow me and she was going to outgrow me very quickly.
You can't have that happen.
That I didn't want.
No.
Because couples don't grow apart. One outgrows the other. There are 2 types of people in marriages. They're growers and status quoers. And if you've got one of each in a marriage, it's just a matter of time before they come apart. Or one shifts behavior. And both growers, she was just leaping.
Yeah.
So I loved the idea of becoming a coach. I was actually planning about 5 years later, 5 years ahead, I was planning on starting a Vistage practice. It's a CEO organization. And I wanted to be a coach before I did that. But
Yeah.
I was watching Elaine. I was like, okay, so I'm going to go. And I went to the first training weekend and I was like, holy shit, this is it. I found it. Much like the reaction she had, there was language and structure and tools
Yeah.
for what I had been doing for a decade and a half before that as in technology.
Mhm.
As a consultant, I was never satisfied with the break fix modality. And if it wasn't broken, finding a way for them to think it was broken so you could get paid to fix it.
Yeah.
That wasn't
Little
enough.
ethical issue. Yeah.
I was always much more interested in how the silicon served the carbon and not the other way around.
Interesting.
Our big pitch when we were dealing with networks and in network consulting was that you don't adapt your business model to the way the technology works. You design and use the technology in a way that serves your model, your people. The carbon is served by the silicon, not the other way around. So we always looked at what the flow was and who the people were and how they worked together and what they needed before we designed anything for the company. And that hugely set us apart. That was long before I got into the website. And so even my partner in the internet strategy and web development company, we were always looking at how does whatever digital initiative we're being asked to help them create, how does that serve the broader corporate initiatives? And how does this fit into who this company is and who the people are?
Yeah.
So I'd been playing more like a coach all the way along. I
Mhm.
just didn't know what the hell I was doing until I started getting the training.
Yeah. And that seems to be the story I find with a lot of, successful coaches for sure is
hmm
they've been doing it. Just the training gave them the framework that they needed to really shift it into high gear and either make a business out of it or make a life out of it. But to better serve the carbon, as it were, as you said. Yeah.
If only more coaches were actually making a living doing it. I mean, the sad truth is, sort of like real estate agents, they're only a
Mhm.
fraction of coaches that actually make a living doing it.
Yeah.
Executive coaches, the average in 2019 was 57,600 a year,
Yeah.
and life coaches were somewhere in the low to mid 30s.
It's a sideline more than a main line, it
No, they're
seems.
not taught to make it into a business.
Hmm.
They're taught the coaching skills.
Yeah.
They're taught the art and science of coaching. But one thing the primary schools haven't been able to do, and even the ones in the academic side, the universities that are developing programs, they're not teaching them how to be business people and
Yeah.
how to be in business, how to be an entrepreneur. And you don't switch from working for someone else to working for yourself and wing it.
No.
It's a very expensive way to do it. And so, I mean, the important piece is for anybody who's having that entrepreneurial seizure and jumping out of corporate, got to have some clue what they're doing.
It's so funny you brought up the entrepreneurial Caesar because I just read the E-Myth
There you go.
just recently, and it's exactly that. You think you've got this passion, and you think that, and you're good at something. So passion plus skill automatically equals business success. This is exactly what I'm going to do. Jump into it with all you have. What's missing? What's missing is the business. What's missing is the strategy. What's missing is actually any chance of succeeding in the long term. You're just creating a new job. Rather than, and that was like the first half of the E-Myth, which I really appreciated. The second,
Yeah,
when
he
they started
talked
going
about
to free franchises, it lost me a little bit. But
the entrepreneurial seizure usually
yeah,
ends up becoming the technician's nightmare.
yes,
That's the hard part. It's that if you don't understand what it is to run a practice, let alone run a company, then that consumes so much of your energy figuring it out.
Mhm.
And too many coaches conflate the dissonance, the unpleasantness around learning something they suck at with with coaching as a business, as opposed to this is the coaching, the art and science of coaching is over here. I love this part. The business part is where I'm having issues. So
Yeah.
when they can separate those two, I see too many coaches walk away from the
Mhm.
coaching business because they conflate the two.
Did you take that approach from the beginning, where you knew once you got it started, you knew that I'm going to make a business of this, and did you do it right, or did you learn some lessons along the way, or?
I was in this to make a living from day one.
Yeah.
There are a lot of martyrpreneurs in coaching. This work is so important. How can I charge money for it? Well, if you don't, you got to go get an effing job. And then you're not serving people the same way. So yeah, I hit six figures in the first 10 months because I was intent on making this, going through the discomfort of shifting the way I knew how to do business with a new way of doing it.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be able to support myself and my family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I learned
Of
a
course.
ton of lessons along the way, but one of them was not learning how to charge for what I do.
Good.
I knew that
So
one.
you kicked it off. I mean, you certainly established a heck of a brand for yourself. And, coming in from my marketing communication side, seeing, my listeners can't see this, but as I'm talking to David, it's very clear that David is on brand, right? We have the Mindset Mondays book on display, but we also have David's blue and green and white branding around. I mean, and I definitely encourage everybody to go check out dtkcoaching.com because it's not only is it an exercise or not only will you find great information, but it's a great branded website. So you got to check it out just from a business standpoint. Anyway, David's done, did you start that way? Did you have all those pieces in place when you kicked off?
Here's the secret.
Yeah.
Find somebody you trust and listen to them.
Yeah.
I've been working with Jody Hirsch at Orange Star Design since 1996. She rebranded my internet strategy and web development company back then. She did a bunch of sites for us along the way, a bunch of sites for clients. She's done a bunch of work for me. She even did a birth announcement for our middle child. I mean, I have relied upon Jody for so many things for so long. Yeah, you find somebody you trust and stick with them.
Yeah, good advice.
Hire somebody smarter than you and get out of their way.
I think that should be the mantra for every manager and every leader.
Absolutely.
Anywhere. And which kind of is a nice segue into what you do for a living is just helping managers and leaders to be better managers and leaders. But you also have a kind of unique slant, I think, or a unique, I don't want to call it USP, but certainly your thing is reintroducing successful entrepreneurs and senior executives to their families.
Mm-hmm.
When we first talked months ago, you said to me, boil down what you can do into 6 words. Was it 6 or 8? It was 6, right?
It was 6.
Yeah. And if you take out like the prepositions and stuff, you got 6 there.
Well, it's even better. It's reintroducing successful entrepreneurs to their families. 6 words.
To their families, yes.
And the reason it's interesting, Mike Ween, years ago, I think it was 2013, challenged me. I work with primarily 2 demographic silos, entrepreneurs and senior executives. But here's the thing. It's not the demographics that define my market. It's the psychographic element. Because there is a psychographic that goes across all of my clients, whether they work, whether they don't, whether they have kids or they don't, married or not, it doesn't matter. The one psychographic is they have figured out already that their next level of professional success or fulfillment is dependent upon the next level of personal growth. Mm-hmm. They already get that the goal for getting better at doing what they do starts with getting better at being who they be. That's the consistent psychographic, right? Not necessarily externally observable. You can look at someone and say, oh, well, they had this role or that role. No. This is a different animal. So I've always said successful entrepreneurs and senior executives. Mike Ween gave me a challenge. He used to be CMO at Frito-Lay and Pepsi. Mike challenged me one day at lunch. I stopped eating after he said it. He said, okay, you can only say, I reintroduce successful entrepreneurs to their families. That's it. Nothing else. Don't speak of any other market. Don't speak of any other demographic or psychographic. Just that for the next 3 weeks. Signed on 6 new clients in those 3 weeks. Not one of them was an entrepreneur. Every one of them was a senior leader. Half of them had children, half of them didn't. It doesn't matter as long as what you speak to what you say elicits in them some emotional understanding in their language right away. It doesn't speak to what I do or how I do it. Mm-hmm. It only speaks to the value of the outcome of having done the work with me.
Yeah.
the value of the outcome. And for people that are over calibrated towards work, that have lost touch with what's important, that are working themselves to death slowly, or they see that coming, they get it immediately.
So these folks are already quite self-aware by the time they get to you. Is
At least by the end of the first conversation, that idea resonates with them very quickly. If it doesn't, if it's no, I just got to get better at doing what I'm doing, got to get better leadership presence, better this, better that, then not ideal for me.
Yeah. And that's key. Like, it's another theme that I find across successful coaches is, you know what you are, where to say no, like who to say no to. Very clear. No, I can't help you. You're going to go someplace
Well,
else.
yeah, I can help you, but that's not the best use of my time.
Yeah.
Marshall Goldsmith said it, several years ago now, 5-6 years ago. He said this, he's arguably the number one executive coach on the planet.
Yeah.
Marshall said, the secret to success as a coach is client selection. Pick your clients and pick them really well. And it's true. You want to pick people who you can serve. I can serve a lot of other people than I do. And that would be to look at Gay Hendricks' work, that would be in my zone of excellence. I could do it. I could do it really well. And I've gotten rewards and accolades and income around it. Great. But it's not my zone of genius. And so those are maybe 8s and 9s on a scale of 10 for me as an ideal client. The 10s are the folks that hit that demographic, the ones that when I'm living, leading, loving, and coaching at my best, those are the humans that I can serve best. And so if I say no to everybody else, I have more time, more energy, more everything available to serve those folks that I can serve the best.
And when those folks talk about, or when in your course of your first conversation, or whatever, you talk about getting reintroduced to family, is it always manifested as family? Is that where it always comes out? Like, or is it? Did you find it to be if you're going to paint it with a broader brush, is it a balance thing, spirituality thing, or?
Guys? Okay,
Sorry.
so no. Using the word balance, it triggers that whole work-life balance bullshit, which I
don't buy it.
Work-life balance is killing us. There's no better way to say it. The idea that, first of all, whose perverted idea was it to put work first in that phrase? That's indicative of what's wrong. I did a search several years ago on Google. I set it to the 100 results instead of just the first 10, right? And I used strict Boolean search. I had in quotes what I wanted, so I got those words and those words only in order, and it was life, work, balance. I just wanted to see. 75 of those first 100 results came back as work-life balance. Even the algorithm has it wrong.
Yeah.
Even the algorithm, thinking it's helping, is forcing the wrong thing into focus. That's not how we're wired, right? That we can make work more important is what poisons our thinking, right? It's not like, we've got 70 hours a week for work and we're going to jam life into the little corners and the cracks of what's left. No, that's why people are left feeling hollow. Full wallet, empty heart. It sucks. So the idea, work is no different in our lives than play, than sleep, than family time, than anything else that's part of it. Why give it priority? In fact, not only should it not be life-work balance, it should just be life balance, because work is part of life. And even worse than that, if you're gonna balance two things, you kind of have to separate them. Good luck.
Yes.
Right? So it's really about finding a rhythm that works between work and play and family and all the things that are important to you. So the goal, the destination, is really developing a life rhythm that works for you in your world with what's important. So what I'm working with folks to do is help them identify first, what is it that's actually important? So I came out of Penn in the mid to late Reagan years. And a vast majority of the people in my year went to Wall Street in one form or another, whether it was to the financial side, the accounting side, or the consulting side. That's where they flocked. It was the early era of the junk bonds and financial world's version of irrational exuberance that the tech world had decades later. And
by the way, that's the other connection that we have. We both went to Penn. And I was just a couple years after that. And I'd say by the time I graduated in 1993, so we're a little bit,
a little gap.
Still a little while ago, but a little after you, it was Wall Street or it was the law firms.
Yeah.
Right. And that was like 90% of my class, especially in my chosen areas of my major, which, was international relations, poli-sci, essentially things that weren't going to get me a job. All those people went to work for Wall
Finance
Street
and
or
law.
Consulting firms.
And it was interesting that so many of the folks that I went to school with had such an idealist bent to them. They had all these ideas of what they wanted to see their world look like and how they were going to change things. And the deal they made, many of them out loud, not just with themselves, was, I'm going to make a crap load of money. And then when I'm there and I'm settled, then I'll start doing the cool things that I want to do, the important things that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere in their mid to late 40s, early 50s, 5 to 10 years ago for me, they looked around and went, holy shit, I have made a ton of money. I mean, these are people that are making $500,000 to $2 million a year and still living paycheck to paycheck, because Parkinson's law, as your income increases, your expenses rise to meet or exceed them. It's an awful pattern, right? Even the ones that are making well more than $2 million a year, right? Now, they all of a sudden looked around and goes, holy crap, I forgot all those things that I wanted to do and what I wanted the world to look like. So no, it doesn't always manifest as reconnecting to their family. It's reconnecting to fill in the blank. These are the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
And whether they really want to do all those magnificent things they wanted to do when they were 18, 19, 20, 21, those things spoke to their values more than what they're doing now. And getting reconnected to those drivers, that's core and fundamental to who they are.
Some people dismiss that as nostalgia, right? They have that pang of, oh man, I really want to get back to that phrase. I want to get back to something. And they're like, oh, I'm just being nostalgic. I really need to be pushing forward with something. But certainly in the last year, but I've done quite a bit of soul searching or self-thinking or whatever you want to call it about this. And, I'm with you. I think I did kind of dismiss some of that as well. Those are the early days. But what is the core? What is my value? What's important to me? That has not changed, right? So to look in and say, look, I'm unhappy doing X, Y, Z, or something's missing. It's not that I was unhappy doing these things. Just there's definitely things that are missing. And for me, that I found that to be, and I'm still on the road to finding all these things. But to me, a large part of it was the fact that I want to be, or I need to be creative, and I need to do creative things or create something of value and of interest. Podcast is a result of that. It's a result of that. And I want to do it in my voice, marching to the beat of my own drum, right? So this need for autonomy is kind of strong. And if I can't get all of that in work, then I'm going to make space for that outside of work. And that's where the balance situation comes in, because there's not balance, is it? Right?
No.
and I just want to riff a little bit on what you said, because I had a conversation last night with a dear friend, longtime coach as well, who he's a guy living in Japan. He's a Stephen Chandler devotee.
Yep.
But my friend Andrew Silberman has been running an executive training coaching company for years. And he just wrote this book that we talked about called You Get a Grip on Remote Work, right? It's a little handbook to working remotely. And we've talked about that a lot. Anyway, last night we had this long discussion about balance. And I said, work-life balance, I don't buy it. Like, I simply don't buy the concept for a lot of the reasons you cited, David. But it's really just because, it's an excuse for the employer or for the boss or for the manager or somebody, I think it can be an excuse for them to lay more stuff on you, or to, kind of try to help you to achieve some sort of place where you're putting work in a higher priority than it necessarily was. But I also
you'll
think
put more effort and energy into it while you're there and engaged. I'm doing air quotes. While you're there and engaged.
While you bring your whole self to work.
Yep.
which well, if I don't bring my whole self everywhere, where am I bringing my whole self? I'm myself. I don't understand that from fundamentally, but I just think that this whole idea of balance, of work-life balance, is nonsense. And it's been destructive. You know, I mean, I don't know how many times I have been in one-on-one meetings with a manager at one point or another in my career, and the managers, and I would say, they'd say, you didn't answer your emails last night, or didn't you see the BlackBerry blinking? To date myself, didn't you see these, And I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, come on, like
No,
you
I
need to
didn't.
achieve.
I had it turned off.
Well, for me, it went in a drawer, but like you need to achieve. They said you need to achieve a better balance, Dan. Well, that to me isn't balance. That to me is a egregious wrong in my well-being. So instead of looking for work-life balance, I started to think about life well-being or well-roundedness or something like this. So trying to achieve that is a constant. I think if it's not a struggle, it's certainly something you have to be mindful of. You have to be looking around for it. Be conscious of the fact that I'm putting too much into this. I need to spend more time with these people. Or what's making me unhappy. I don't know. This is something that I'm sure that happens at
Well,
the very beginning of conversations with you.
the
David.
challenge is there's that
Yeah.
piece about, I'm going to put less time into this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the human brain doesn't like to stop doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take this to the extreme. Let's equate the dopamine hits we get from zero inbox and getting this thing off the table, the addiction to the check mark, all the clearing the to-dos, the constant doing, the constant non-essential busyness, which is just saturating and overarching the necessary busy, right? Dan, I totally lost where I was going.
The you had an imbalance for a moment there. You've
Yeah, I just totally lost where I was
we were
going.
just talking about
Fabulous.
the dopamine and the brain wants to
The
keep
human
doing
brain
stuff.
doesn't like to stop doing anything. So
Yeah.
we've got a dopamine feeder trough that we've got our head in.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: heroin. The treatment for heroin has been replacement therapy for decades. That has been the treatment. We give methadone. We don't just say, okay, you're going to stop doing heroin. It doesn't work.
Right.
People die.
Mhm.
Right? First of all, the DTs, the delirium tremors, the coming off of it is terrible.
Yeah.
And so instead of torturing the body and risking death, we give them something that is less destructive, that serves them better. So when you say, I'm going to stop doing that, I'm going to do less work, I'm going to give it less time. No, you've got a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what are you going to replace it with? And the replacement comes, let's go back to what you were saying earlier, that the things that you were speaking to are your true currencies. That'll make sense in a minute. You were talking about autonomy, creating or being creative, about your own voice. And I know we've talked about your international travel and international living, personal growth. These are all things that are important to you.
Yeah.
Right. So when you start giving time to those, balancing your portfolio of the things that truly move you, the currencies that move you, right? Then that's how you give less time to the work bucket, because you're giving more time to the things that nurture you. Now, work may nurture you too. That's fine. But instead of giving it 70, 80 hours a week and giving you no time for the things that nurture you, that feed you, that maintain the relationships that are important to you, you can't stop one. You have to fill the time with something else. And most people experience it in a very negative way.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, even before COVID, when we have sandwich generation living, all of a sudden you've got a family member in your house or a parent that all of a sudden needs chronic care. And you're going to end up contributing to or being that primary caregiver. God forbid it's a child or a parent that's ill. You will start giving less time to work.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you can fit in when you've got to bolt out that door between 4 and 5 o'clock, because you have no other option. I'll be damned, you can get everything done in 7.5 hours that used to take you 14, because you have to. Well, what if we started creating a rhythm where we were choosing to? because I have these other things that are important to me.
Mhm.
So the question is, do you wait until the universe slaps you in the back of the head with a baseball bat? Or do you listen to the whisper of, I'm not getting what I want. I'm not nurtured. I'm not, when I turn the doorknob to my office, my stomach turns. Spoiler alert, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And part of this comes down to a fundamental reworking of the way we value our success or measure our success. And that's what I mean by currencies. Money is not a currency of success.
Yeah.
Period, full stop. That we use money to measure our success is as toxic as the concept of work-life balance. It doesn't matter what mind games you play with it or word games you play with it. It's not always money earned, clients won, projects sold. Sometimes we get sneaky and say, oh, it's money saved. It's money donated. Oh my God. We can get really creative. It's all money. Stop it. Because it's not really a currency. The currencies that are important, we played with some of yours already. That autonomy, the creativity, creating your own voice, international travel, international living. These things are your currencies. Success for us should be a balanced portfolio of those.
Mhm.
Money is just a fungible asset that one uses
Yeah.
to fund the things that are important to us.
Mhm.
But that's not the measure of success. Read Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens. Money isn't just like nation states and corporations are just agreed upon fictions. We just all have chosen to believe in those structures. That's why they don't mean shit to us.
Yeah.
That's why it's hollow when we use those to measure our success. Success is a measurement of internal forces. So that's what I mean about you don't just say, I'm going to give less time to work. That's magical thinking.
Mhm. Well, you will fill it somehow. You're right. That if you miraculously, are able to cut something out, time is the only resource that we have that is not that is fixed, right? So you will fill it somehow, and you're right. That makes a lot of sense. The brain doesn't want to stop
Nope.
doing something.
Not at all.
I was just reading this book called The War of Art. Have you ever read this? Stephen Pressfield?
Very long time ago, but yes, my son was just talking about that. So I think it's time for me to read it again.
I'm so thrilled with this book, but I'm at the same time, I'm shamed by it constantly because the first part of the book, and it's the only part I've read so far, is all about the resistance that you face that is there to get you. It's like a force that is there that is going to stop you from doing the things that you are, that you really should be doing or want to be doing, the work, the work of especially if you're a creator, so, and resistance will throw things in your way all the time. So if you're concerned about this quote unquote work-life balance, that is an invitation to resistance. It's an invitation to resistance to come in. The resistance is like standing in the background, whatever, playing with its snidely mustache,
Yep.
or its whiplash mustache, or rubbing its hands, or doing a Mr. Evil or Dr. Evil kind of laugh. It's the Ernst Stavros Blofeld with the cat. It is just waiting there for you to say, fine, why don't you stop doing work for a couple hours? Let's throw Netflix in your way. How about at the easiest level, or if you're not doing work, well, maybe I'll throw guilt your way. And guilt is a great way to resist doing other things. It just gets crazy. So I'm loving this idea of anthropomorphizing resistance a little bit and, trying to imagine what is keeping me from doing some of the creative adventures that I've been planning to do or wanting to do or hoping to do. And, every time I think about it, that I think about what I've done and I'm very happy about that. I think about what I haven't done and I sort of feel guilty. I'm like, oh, I need to be doing this. And the fact that I feel guilty about it, that I feel almost inwardly shamed that I haven't yet written that book is a sure sign that I need to do that book. That's the only way to get the resistance off of my shoulders.
I love playing with words. And I think there's a challenge when we use a word like need.
Mm-hmm.
I need to. Because resistance is actually a very powerful tool that you can use in a positive way. I mean, yeah, you hear people say, oh my God, the oyster is polished through The pearl exists only because of irritation.
Right.
And the gem doesn't get polished without friction. Fine. That's great. And resistance and dissonance are there just to draw your awareness to what's not being seen, thought about, understood, what's being avoided, what is not coming to the surface. What is it that's craving your attention? So when I hear creatives talk about, got a lot of resistance around this, a lot of dissonance around this. So get the language out of your head. What is it that comes up? What does the resistance sound like? It had language. When you're sitting looking at the blank canvas and you're feeling the resistance, or you don't want to walk into the damn studio or whatever your creative outlet is, what's the language in your head?
I don't know the answer to that. Or maybe, I think it varies, time to time, day to day, task to task. It's always, there's something that stops you from, doing something if you're not doing it, clearly. Oftentimes the language, I suppose if I think about it, it would be, you're wasting your time on this. You have other things to do.
Mm-hmm. So the responsibility angle is one.
Probably a big one. Or, when I started on this journey, it would be like, who are you to do this?
Right.
Right. The
imposter
whole
playground.
imposter syndrome.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? I think I'm beyond that personally. I don't feel like that's
we'll get back
the issue.
to that. I hope you never lose it, but keep going.
Yeah. Or something like, does the world really need this right now?
Right.
Is this really the right direction?
External evaluation, not internal.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of times I hear the lines about, oh my God, it's going to take me so long to get good at this.
Oh, that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll never master this. Right. And all of it, so much of this has to do with how's it going to be received? How's it going to be seen? Who are you? The whole imposter syndrome is not an internal judge, it's an external. And it's usually a projected or completely made up external judge. Does the world really need this? Will anybody appreciate it? Will anybody buy it? They're all in the same vein. But all this is, and by the way, they're very similar, whether it's creative or launching a new company or a product launch or anything. So those are there's language that the resistance shows up as. Or I'm afraid I'm going to enjoy it too much.
Yeah.
I'm not going to want to do anything else, right? There are lots of flavors of it. But the point is to start unpacking what the dissonance is. And then underneath it to look at what's really attracting you to do it. What's drawing you? What part of this is resonance? What's moving you? What's motivating you? What's inspiring you? What's the irritation? What are you moving away from that you're choosing to move to this? What's drawing you to move towards this? It's exploring it. What's possible when I explore this? Right. So we don't surface the unspoken, and it's the unspoken that stops us from moving. It used to be the idea of the artist's way was all about, it was designed for creatives. Holy crap, it has an amazing impact on people who are not quote unquote creatives, because it's just a matter of training yourself to let out what's inside. And so what concerns me when I hear people say, I need to write this book, is sometimes it's another mind game of the only way I'm going to have what I want in this world is to get this book out of me. So I need to do it.
Right.
And even if it's the only way I can feel expressed is to get this out. So I need to. Need is still an internal locus of influence. It's outside of you. Need to, ought to, must, have to, should. Those should all be 4-letter words. Yes, I just use should. Because you're shoulding all over yourself. It doesn't do you any good to use external motivators because it just increases dissonance.
Yeah.
Test it. Does it work? If you say, I really need to write this book, does that sentence work with the word want in place of need? Or I get to? Or, if it floats your boat, I'm blessed to be able to. Try it with that language and see if it resonates.
Yeah. I get to write this book, or I get to do my podcast. I get to do these things. To me, I feel like I'm not a super, super spiritual person. But I am, to a degree. I think that there are forces out there that we simply don't necessarily understand, but that, help to illuminate the world around us if we kind of can tap into it a little bit. And I think that when we say, I get to do something, you're tapping into that. It's this just force of nature that is speaking to you when you say, I get to do this. It's a privilege. I don't know, maybe that's not the best way to explain it, but it is an honor to do something. Need to is a kind of throwback to the BS, right? The belief system, the limiting beliefs that we have. Somebody had inculcated in me as a child that there's an achievement that has to be done, so you got to get it done. I'm sort of digging into my Carol Dweck a little bit there, but I buy that. I don't always verbalize it that easily, but when I think it through, it makes sense to me.
That's what Don Miguel Ruiz talks about, going back 2,500 years to Toltec wisdom, the origins of it. He talks about domestication in his book, The Four Agreements. If anybody who's listening needs a book to read right now, if anybody out there that's listening wants a book to read right now, it qualifies as a tiny book. It's under 120 pages. Go get it, read it, and then read it again. It's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. One of the things he talks about is exactly that, the idea of domestication, that we have had agreements, unwritten rules, customs, morals, you name it, that have been foisted upon us by our families, our communities, the acculturation processes around us, the educational processes. And we never bother to test whether they're ours or not, whether we've adopted them because they've been given to us. We've never evaluated, does this work for me? My friend Hayden Lee, who's another coach, he was talking about growing up in a culture of, he was in a household where he was born here, his parents were born in China. And so the rule for him, and this was not an unspoken one, this is what he heard, that you could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disgrace. You had 4 choices. And I was like, you had engineer? I grew up in a Jewish house. We had doctor, lawyer, architect. That was it. We had doctor or lawyer. Architect came later. So we never had engineer. And it's fascinating that achievement elite mentality leaves people who have a different path hardwired, different things that are important to them. When duty overwhelms everything else, it leaves people crushed. And that is domestication. Those are rules handed down that aren't yours.
Yeah.
They weren't my parents either.
Yeah, somebody handed them to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Husband asks his new wife why she's cutting off the ends of the roast before she puts it into the oven. She says, I don't know, my mom did. So she asked her mother. She said, I don't know, my mom did. And of course, grandma says, Bubby did before me, but she had a teeny oven, so she would cut off the ends so it would fit. And it's just been passed down as a tradition for 3 more generations, and it never made sense to anyone. We do that all the time.
That's a very apropos metaphor, too.
That shows up with the need tos a lot. So if the book is part of how you want to serve yourself and those around you, fabulous.
Yeah.
I didn't start off wanting to write this book. This was Jody's idea, my marketing person. When I came to her in 2017 and said, I want to become more facile speaking to any topic through the lens of my point of view, live and off the cuff. So I stopped listening after the first sentence, which was, okay, all of your business cards have a different quote on the back. Flip on a live stream, grab a card, and riff off of it for 10 to 15 minutes once a week. Now, at that point, my stomach turned over. I didn't want to do live videos. It was like, oh, you're right, and I don't want to do it, which is usually what tells me I
should
want to do it.
Wanted.
Right. And so she evidently went on to say, oh my God, it would turn into a book and live events and courses and just on and on. I heard blah, 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 because I stopped thinking once she said live video. So we wrote up this whole marketing plan and I sat on it for almost a year because I really didn't want to do the live video.
I'm with you.
And then I assist for CTI in delivering their curriculum, or I did for many, many years. And I was in a course during January of 18. And I was assisting some new coaches in the little practice stuff. And one of them was a badass little coach and really challenged me on, the issue I brought was wanting to be more visible to a wider audience. And I outed myself that I had this thing that I've been sitting on for almost a year. She goes, I'll wait. Go ahead. I said, what do you mean, go ahead? She goes, get your phone, text Jody, tell her when you're launching. I'll wait. So Groundhog Day, that Monday, February 2nd, I launched Mindset Mondays with DTK. And I'll be damned. People started showing up for the live broadcasts. It started to market itself. A lot of word of mouth. Jody and I started promoting it some. And then, my God, people started engaging. We've got launched a private Facebook group for folks who listen in and participate. Mm-hmm. And the conversation started. Now, it doesn't matter what I knew about leadership and mindset. I learned so much more about it from the community. And so the book became inevitable. It was, oh my God, this is where I can compile what I know and what I've learned and what has come up and surfaced through the community into something that people can use to create shift for themselves. And it gave me a bigger footprint of impact. It allowed me to do more of my work in a wider circle. Then it became an I want to. That's the only reason the book happened. It's because I wanted to. The I need to part of it, I was like, I will do anything but.
Yeah,
I will go do my taxes again before I will start putting the book together.
Well, you started off with the video series. That was the initial idea, and thinking all the way 4 steps down to book was too far outside the initial zone, right? Like to really conceptualize at that point.
Perhaps. Oh, no. To be fair, I could have conceptualized it. We wrote out the plan.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it.
I hear you.
I was so fixated on I don't want to do the live video. My friend Jason Hartnoff, not long after this conversation with Jody, had said, your first 6 videos are going to suck. So just get out there and start sucking. They don't get good until you've sucked for a while.
Yeah.
And I just shared a text exchange with him over the weekend. I was like, you bastard, it's 10, not 6. The first 10 were awful. That's terrible.
That's exactly how I launched the podcast, was with an episode called Shit or It.
Yeah.
Right? You have to go out there and you know that the first couple of things you do are going to be shitty, but you have to do that to learn it, to figure it out, and it will get better. It's just gonna, if you want to do it.
You get why the first ones are going to be shit.
Yeah.
And why that becomes a problem. Why we let it stop us is it's a perfect example of what Teddy Roosevelt said, that comparison is the thief of joy. We're comparing our beginning to everybody else's middle. So it's like, oh my God, they're so good, so smooth, it's so polished, it's so perfectly done.
Yeah.
And I still suck. Of course you still suck. It's the beginning.
Yeah.
And so when we stop comparing, it stops sucking in the moment. You realize that this is just like you fell off your bike, just like you stumbled when you were learning to walk. You didn't stop learning to walk because you skinned your knee. It'd be very hard for my parents to still carry me around on their hip.
I guess it's a fundamental law of creation. You have to. You see, the process means failure.
Yeah.
And failure, though, is an external thing. It's the way that people are looking at you, perhaps. It's, you see it as a failure because it's not living up to your image of what you wanted it to be for others, right? This is your first video, your first podcast, your first whatever it is, your first attempt. I've been doing video lately, trying to do 2 a week, just when I have time. And the first ones were really hard to do. The third one wasn't hard to do, but still isn't great. But it's, you know what I mean? But I feel like, this is not bad. This is something I can do. And, then you find that you step out the comfort zone and then suddenly you have a new comfort zone, which you can then step out of again for the next level of whatever that might be, and getting there. Okay, I'm doing the videos now. Better video is still a little further outside maybe live is the next thing outside the comfort zone. Maybe, right? Just thinking it through. But I love your Mindset Mondays, by the way. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sort of segues a little bit into, we've gone deep into a few things and weren't able to cover some of the things I really wanted to cover like your framework. Yeah, the Rewire framework.
Oh, yeah.
And because some of the things we're talking about here can be, it's a great tool that people can use to solve some of the issues that we are actually talking about, or at least begin that process. And the Rewire framework is found in the Mindset Mondays book. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
I would love to look. One of the great pieces of advice I got, write the book you needed to read. So I look back at key inflection points in my world and what I needed, what would have changed my arc in so many places. Taking things that I was working on and be able to make that learning or that shift or that new way of thinking, being, or doing, making it real and making it last. And then I'd read something in 2015 from the Pew Research Foundation that 41% of people who buy a book, notably less than half, 41% of people who buy a book read past chapter 1. That's discouraging. Now, I mean, I look at the books, just the books on this shelf behind me that you can see on the video we've got going.
Yeah.
Maybe 24 books, a whole nother rack over there. And of these, I can point to 3 of them that I haven't gotten to.
Yeah.
They're shelfware right now. This one's been on there for 2 years.
Is that the Kahneman book?
No, that's Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made.
Oh, okay. I can't read it from here. By the way.
It's been sitting there for 2 years. And I definitely want to read it. And it would be great for me to do so. It just hasn't made it to the top of the pile yet. But I realize that a lot of books end up shelfware. And so the learning doesn't happen because it doesn't get used and it doesn't stick. Well, I remembered when I was coming up, I was fascinated in math class, not by the topic, but we didn't get tested at the end of chapter 1. We went on to chapter 2, which involved using stuff we had learned in chapter 1 and integrating the new stuff in chapter 2. And at the end of chapter 2, we got tested on chapter 1 because we had seen it, done it, experienced it, and then used it in a real world environment, more or less. Then it would make sense enough to be tested on. And after chapter 3, we got tested on chapter 2, and so on. If we don't use what we're learning, we lose it. How many times has a team or a company done this brilliant offsite and everybody's motivated, the new plan, new idea, new strategy, new concepts for personal development, whatever. Monday morning comes, email starts flooding, phone starts ringing, people are walking into your office in a highly interrupt-driven world that we live in, and all that shit goes away.
Yeah.
It's that cube-nesia, and it's sad. So damn it, I was going to fix that. Mm-hmm. So Laurie Shires, my co-author, and I came up with a framework called Rewire. It's an acronym. And Rewire is a structured approach to integrate and reinforce new ways of thinking, being, and doing. So whether it's new concept you're learning, a new framework you're trying out, the idea is to first pause and reflect. Give yourself time and space to breathe and reflect on your experience. I'll use the example of the book. There are 6 different prompts at the end of each chapter that you walk through, and it's giving you a chance to reflect on what you experienced from the learning of that chapter. Chapters are designed to be readily digestible and immediately actionable, and then you reflect on what's landed, right? Then you play with it. We give you an experiment to play with a new idea or concept and look at what resonates, what's dissonant, what works, what doesn't work, what you're indifferent to, right? And use that experiment out in your world, and then sit down and write. Brené Brown says, love the way she describes it, that writing by hand is taking information from head to heart to hand to paper. It's different than typing. It's different than even writing on an iPad or a tablet. Sit down with pen or pencil and paper and write. I wanted to eliminate as many excuses as possible. I put a page for journaling after each of the 52 chapters so that you've got it right there. You just have to find something to write with. But you're writing down what surfaced for you during that experiment.
Yeah.
Now, the next step is to investigate that learning, pull it apart, and use that new awareness, new learning to revise the experiment and take that back out into your world. And the last step is what makes it real, is now expand that learning that you've learned through those 5 steps, and then expand, take it out into your world and use it in a different area. Use chapter 1, while you're doing chapter 2.
Hmm.
So this is a mechanism to help you make learning real and stick. So even to the point that while we were waiting for the book to get handled and produced, all the stuff that the author doesn't get to do, made the Rewire framework available for download on my website. It's simple. You go to rewireframework.com and you'll see the diagram of the Rewire framework, the 6 steps, and you can download it for free. Use it, apply it to anything you're working on. Create prompts and steps for you to do with a colleague, a partner, a spouse, a child, and play with this framework to help make the things you're working on stick. Now, it's great in the book because, again, there are prompts that are customized for each chapter's content so that you really can use what's in the book effectively and powerfully. Now, the only downside is there are 52 chapters and most people are going through it 1 chapter a week to really play with it and get the most out of it, which has been such a pain to get reviews on the Amazon site because they're like, yeah. I'm 2 months in. Give me a minute. I'll get back to your review.
It released in September. Right. You'll start seeing the reviews roll in about August.
In the fall,
October.
Right? Exactly.
It's fantastic. First of all, I mean, congratulations on the book. But when I saw that, the Rewire framework, right? The reflect, experiment, write, investigate, revise, expand, rewire. I just immediately thought, this is a creative process. This is a really wonderful way to flesh out some of those just ideas that you've got. They're floating around in the chaos, and put an organizing principle around them. And cut out the wheat, separate the wheat from the chaff and see which way you're going to go forward. It's a very useful method. And I do look forward to employing it and trying it out. They say theft is the highest form of flattery. I will always say where I got it from. So I'll never steal it, but I do plan to use it and transmit it to others. So
that's what Austin Kleon says. He said, steal like an artist. Use it and then be creative with it.
That's why I'm hoping to do that. I think it's terrific. And look, there's so many other things that David's been up to and has done. I wanted to also get into some of the Mindset Monday videos because you pull out a great quote every week and talk it through. It's lessons in leadership, lessons in just your thinking. It's kind of like what I've seen here and heard on this podcast for 15 minutes every week. And it's delightful. And sometimes you cross into more personal territory. Sometimes you're talking about, whatever the quote is, but there's 153 episodes as of this recording. So by the time
this morning,
as of this morning, yeah. So by the time our listeners hear this, it'll be somewhere around the 160s or 170s. But definitely go to dtkcoaching.com to listen to Mindset Mondays. To check out the book, go to Amazon and look up David Taylor-Klaus, and his name will be spelt properly in the episode title. So give a search for David Taylor-Klaus that way. Look for David on LinkedIn. Go to dtkcoaching.com to find out more, and of course the rewireframework.com to get the Rewire framework. We're just scratching the surface here. We've peeled maybe a half a layer of this onion. So I reserve I make the request, and it's not a right because it's up to you, but I'm making a request for you to come back again. We can dig in a little more at some point in the future, David.
If that's
okay with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Did I miss anything? Is there any other place that people can look for you or should find you?
No, there's actually one more place that folks can go. If you go to mindsetmondays.tv.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There you can see all the past episodes. So all 160 or 70 some odd by the time this airs will be there. And
watch the first one and then go to episode 1, and then you can test out David's assertion that the first few sucked.
Definitely share your opinion about it too, because I like getting flogged, right?
Yeah. Well, David, as a fellow Penn grad, as an aspiring coach, but also as a corporate guy and a leader of people, I've found this to be extremely educational, informative. I like being on the hot seat a little bit there too. I love it when my guests turn the table on me a little bit. It's always fun. And I expected nothing less. But I thank you so much for your time and for joining me today. And I know that, this is just the beginning of many things to come.
Awesome. My pleasure. And I look forward to reading your book.
Awesome. If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.